Hi everyone, I wanted to create a video since we are just a few days away from the AP exam that talks about the synthesis essay, not necessarily in complete detail, but that goes over a few tips and tricks that may help. So I took the prompt from the 2019 AP exam for language and composition, and so um, just if you want to go ahead and pause, do that, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the prompt. So pause this video. Let me go full screen real quick. Um, so you can pause the video and you can read this. Otherwise, I'm going to move along. So early steps. The first thing you're going to do is with the synthesis essay, you saw that prompt, and then I believe there are 6 sources that they provide. And so the first thing you need to do is after you have read the prompt and you understand what it's asking, you have to keep the prompt in mind. Again, the prompt on this one is to develop a position on the most important factors that an individual or agency should consider when deciding whether to establish a wind farm. It's important to note they're not asking you for your position on it. They're not asking you for what you think about wind farms or whether or not wind farms are beneficial or detrimental. They are asking you what is your position on the most important factors that an individual or agency should consider when deciding to establish a wind farm. So in doing that, that needs to be your thesis. When an individual is considering developing a wind farm, they must consider whatever your 3 positions may be: the cost, the efficiency, and the effect on the environment. So if you do anything other than answering that prompt, you can have a well-written essay, but if your position doesn't come back to the prompt, it's not a passing essay. So after you have established what the prompt is, read the sources. Take the 10 to 15 minutes and read every source that's given to you. After you've read those sources, determine your position. All right, so based on the information that they've given you, you need to determine where you're going with it. Then determine the sources that you are keeping. Refer to the prompt. It will tell you the number of sources you need. At this prompt, it said a minimum of 3. Determine the ones that you're going to keep. You can ask, how do I do that? Well, the way you do that is by, of course, you've read it. You know the information that is contained within each. And so you can use those to support your position. And also, I would say, in your determination of the sources, you need to apply a critical eye to them, because sometimes the College Board on the AP exam will introduce sources that are irrelevant or not necessarily applicable. So sometimes you may have a random source that's just, I don't want to say nonsensical. It looks like it'll make sense, but upon further consideration, it may not. If you go into Canvas and you see the synthesis prompt I posted, you can see the sources they provided. And I think one of the sources is a source from howstuffworks.com, which is, I'm not gonna say that it's not okay. It's not necessarily peer reviewed or scholarly, and it was also published in 2006. So they'll throw sources in there that might be on the older side, and you want to go with things that are current, that are relevant, applicable, things like that. After you determine the sources that you're keeping, create your introductory paragraph based on those sources you're using. And a closed thesis is a great idea. A closed thesis, if you remember, is a thesis statement where you preview the 3 main points that you're going to make. For example, as I said earlier, when someone is considering developing a wind farm, they need to consider X, Y, and Z, rather than saying there are many issues to consider when someone develops a wind farm. The example I just gave, that's an open thesis where you don't preview the main points you're making. Tips for writing the synthesis. Number 1, cite your sources. I told my students in class that the synthesis essay is like a research paper, where you've been given the sources. And I think that's, I mean, the hardest part of research is finding good sources. So you're writing an impromptu research paper, which is an argument. Almost any research paper should have an argument within it. But you've been given all the sources, and your job is to figure out which ones you're going to use and which ones, of course, which ones to discard. And after you figure out which ones to use, you're going to have to determine how you're using them. But you do have to cite them. Whether you're quoting or paraphrasing, you still have to cite outside information. They'll tell you, most likely they'll say use 3 sources, and lower scoring essays usually only use 1 source per paragraph. And so you've done the minimum, you've achieved the use of 3 sources, but if you want your essay to have true synthesis, multiple sources need to appear in each paragraph. So maybe you're using source A, C, D, and E. So A and C can appear in paragraph 1, A and E in paragraph 2, D and E in 3, and then you conclude. Tip 3, just like an argument, you can offer a counterclaim, a concession, and a rebuttal, but do so with the sources from the document. Again, your counterclaim, concession, and rebuttal is your 3rd paragraph. And I would do so, if you're doing that, incorporate sources from the documents that are given to you. And especially if you find sources that contradict the position you're making, that's when you use those sources and you use those as your counterclaim and offer a rebuttal to them. Tip 4, if you want to offer an evaluation of a topic, and by evaluate, I mean whether something is beneficial or detrimental, or in other words, good or bad, do that in the conclusion. If you're developing, for example, like, wind turbines, if you're developing a position on what someone needs to consider, you don't want to go off on whether it's good or bad. You just need to talk about, here are the things they need to consider before doing so. And then if you go into evaluating the topic, do it in the conclusion, because that'll also take care of the so what question, and it makes for a sophisticated argument. And then finally, vet your sources. I already said this, but it bears repeating. College Board likes to occasionally offer sources that are either irrelevant or unrelated. And sometimes they don't quite stand out. So when you're looking at a source, you're also looking at where the source came from. So with that, I will go ahead and close it here. This is one of the shorter ones, but if you have any questions, shoot me a message. Thank you.